Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Endless Coffee Cup Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Bailey, and looking forward to another great conversation today. And on this episode, we have Kerry Barrett. And those of you who have been maybe digging into the Marketing Podcast Network, MPN, you may have already discovered Kerry. And Kerry is the host of the Kerry Barrett Show podcast. I love that because, I'm coming from the Endless Coffee Cup. I'm like, well, yours is memorable.
We're very self-absorbed, one or the other.
and everyone's like, you need to change the name of your podcast because it doesn't reflect marketing.
Yeah, but it reflects coffee, and that's what we have.
It does. And that's much more my identity. So, dear listener, hey, you're in for a great show. Kerry and I have already had a nice conversation, but Kerry, welcome to the show. It's about time I've gotten you on here.
Likewise, I need to have you on mine on the Kerry Barrett Show.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background because I am fascinated by it. I was looking through your LinkedIn profile. You had been in television journalism for many years. And tell us a little bit about that and how it's led you to what you're doing right now.
Oh, well, thank you, first of all, for having me on this show. By the way, you have an amazing voice. I had listened to some of your podcasts, but now hearing you sort of live and in person, the dulcet tones of Matt Bailey. Maybe that is the title of your new show.
Well, thank you. Wow. I appreciate that.
Okay, it's a little bit about me. You're right. I was in the broadcast news industry for 20 years. I finished my career, yes, I finished it. I left. I couldn't take it anymore. In 2019, I was at NBC in New York City. And I mean, it is an amazing business. You know, I have a couple of Emmys under my belt. I had success. I enjoyed the people I worked with, but I was also exhausted when I hit that year, 2019. I had my third child. He was about 6 months, and I was pretty much just a shell of myself at that point. I'm getting up at 1:30 in the morning. I could paint a very bleak picture for you, but I'll spare you at this point. It was time to go.
Yes.
Let's leave it at that. So I left the news business in 2019 without really having thought about what it is that I was going to do. I sort of assumed maybe I would go into PR or production because that's what so many former newsies do. Ultimately, though, that was not to be. I met a woman while I was networking and she was like, you should start your own business. And I was like, all right. And that was literally about as much thought as I put into it.
Great.
I came home and told my husband, I'm going to start a business. He's like, doing what? I'm like, I don't really know yet. And he's like, you don't know how to balance a checkbook. And I'm like, that's also true. But I'm going to figure this out. So it took a lot of twists and turns. There were a lot of iterations and offers and that sort of stuff. And what I ultimately settled on was serving the person that I once was. So I used to be terrified of speaking, absolutely terrified of public speaking, being on a camera live in front of, millions of people where all the mistakes are out there and up front. Like that was terrifying when I first started. Terrifying, and I was terrible. So I decided that I would help it's executives now and teams and sales teams and small business owners and entrepreneurs learn how to effectively communicate on camera. So it's, sales pitches, it's Zoom calls, it may be social media. And it's Toastmasters, but for the camera masters.
Nice. Love it.
I describe
Absolutely love it. So that fear, I want to talk about that fear because I went out and looked up what the biggest fears, when they do these surveys, what do people fear the most? Snakes, being buried alive was one. But public speaking, it blows my mind that I think people would rather be buried alive with snakes than speak in public. Tell me about that fear. For me, I guess I've never really had it, but really what I would love to do is encourage people who may not have that inborn gift, but realize that this is something you can learn. Tell me about that fear and what it did to you and how you overcame it.
So snakes I'm not afraid of. The buried alive thing, that is 100% the stuff of nightmares. But I think I know I did. back in like the thick of my fear, I might have preferred to be buried alive and then try and figure out how to dig my way out rather than be put up on a stage and have to claw my
Wow.
way out of that.
Wow.
The fear has always been there. I don't think I really fully recognized how terrified I was until I hit probably middle school. And then we had to start doing reports and stuff, book reports and whatnot, and stand up in front of the class. And wow, if I wasn't aware of how terrified and terrible I was up until that point, I became very aware of it. And it followed me pretty much everywhere I went. And I would say it was beyond a fear of just speaking. I am still shy. I was painfully shy back then. I am still an introvert. I was wildly introverted back then. And anywhere I was, this sort of fear followed me along. And it applied to everything, not just speaking in front of a class. And so when I went to college, and I'll try and make this a little bit short, I had actually enrolled in pre-veterinary medicine. I was going to be a vet. And I did that academically for about a year and a half when organic chemistry put a very decisive
Oh,
end to that career path for me. And I took a year and a half off because I had never assumed I would do anything other than that. And I had
mm,
thought of, any other possible career choice or trajectory for myself. And so I took a year and a half off, a year and a half came and went, and I still had no friggin' idea what it was that I was going to do. So I was at Clemson University, very strong animal science, pre-veterinary medicine school, but in the liberal arts and communications, quite as much. But they had started a new communications department. And it was very broad because
mhm.
it was pretty new. And so it was like business communications. I think speech psychology or pathology was in there, and international language, and a little bit of journalism and marketing and PR and that sort of stuff. So I re-enrolled in communications thinking, well, it's broad enough that I will find something I can use to make a living when I graduate. Number one. Number two, no organic chemistry. And number three, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to take 2 public speaking classes. And I am terrified of this. But I think somewhere in my mind, I knew that it was a little more subjective than chemistry. And I could sort of make it my own in a way that you can't with equations and math and science.
Right.
And so I re-enrolled, and as a way to sort of try and fill and make up for lost time, because I had taken that year and a half off, I was jamming my schedule full of all these credits. So 12 credit hours was full time. I was registered for 24, and I wanted to find a way to jam another 3 in there. And I was in school 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And so the only way I could do it was to get an internship that had, hours that were additional to your sort of normal working hours. It's TV news. It's 24/7, 365. I could work overnights. I could do it on the weekends, whatever. So I got an internship at a local TV station in Greenville, South Carolina, WYFF. It's the NBC affiliate there. And from day one, I loved it. So I had to figure out how to overcome that fear and actually get good at speaking enough so that somebody would pay me to do it, and people would actually watch me and wouldn't flip the channel.
Mm,
And I would say that there was not one moment where suddenly I had all of the skills and like I, sat on the desk and suddenly I was fantastic. That never happened. We all still make mistakes, but it was the guidance and the coaching that came from our consultants and my mentors that gave me the skills. And then I took what I knew academically from the skills and I was able to apply them daily because I had to be on air every single day. And then each time I had a success, it built my confidence and I could sort of explore the space and then not just rely on skills, but actually start to become my own self on video, on camera in that case. And it built my brand in the news industry to where I was able to, finally go to NBC in New York. And I've used video now to build my brand as a business owner. But I would say the real sort of And it wasn't a singular moment, but looking back, I would say the real change came after I had, gotten the skills and everybody's still developing them. And after I learned how to apply them daily, I sort of had this epiphany where I knew that no matter what was going to happen on live TV, the prompter goes out, that I have a coughing fit or my co-anchor passes out or the reporter doesn't make their live shot or whatever it was, I I was going to be able to navigate through to the other side, and it may not be pretty, but I would be able to do it, and I would get through, and the show would be over, and I'd stand up and take my mic off and go back to my desk, and everything would be fine. And I think when I realized that I could navigate whatever was going to be thrown my way, that's when the real change began to happen. That was what was sort of the game changer for me. And then in business, I didn't know anything about business when I first started. I'd go to networking events. People would ask me how I was going to scale, and I'd be like, stand by. I don't know what that means. Google, what does scale mean? And so, but I knew how to make video, and I knew how to, not even make video, but I knew how to be on camera. And so I started a LinkedIn account, and I would just start posting videos. I didn't even have any strategy or story at that time. It was just like, hey, I'm, emceeing this event, or hey, I'm keynoting here, here's how you can sign up if you're interested in attending. And that's just sort of how it started. And that's how I built the brand. And that's how ultimately I was also able to hone my messaging and figure out who my ideal audience was as well.
I love it. Just jump into the fire and
Yeah.
get it done with an idea. I love it. That is it's an awesome entrepreneurial story as well. Just how many people are like, I have an idea, I'm going to do it. I don't care. But like you, yes, I am not good with money, and so I'm not allowed to touch it. I just once in a while get a phone call or a text to stop spending.
I get that probably hourly. And
Wow. I love what you said. Like it's skills, it's practicing the skills, but I love that it's what if something goes wrong and
yeah,
being able to navigate that problem, that obstacle, or something didn't go your way. Did you find that was more of a confidence builder that you've been through it a couple of times, now I know how to do it? Or did you have maybe a framework to follow that if this goes wrong, here's what I do or anything like that?
yeah. Well, in the beginning, I had no framework. I had no framework for anything for that matter. I was just sitting at the desk and like trying to make the best of it. And what I did eventually do, I mean, I learned obviously from people around me when I had a co-anchor, they dealt with it until I had my feet underneath me and could figure out how to do it myself. But what I eventually discovered was that there wasn't, in breaking news, there really isn't a framework. I mean, if something goes wrong, a reporter doesn't make their live shot, right? So you have to stretch, and then you have to learn how to vamp. And sometimes it's for a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's for a half an hour where you have like 5 words of information and no video, and you just have to sit there and sort of say the same thing over and over again, but differently. And sometimes it's, the prompter goes down, and then you realize I have to be present enough that I can, again, vamp with whatever was going on behind me or whatever the story was prior, or, stretch until we get to the next thing. So to answer your question in a nutshell, it wasn't really that there was a framework. It was, I've got to figure out every single thing as it happens. And that was eventually how I built the skills. But I always say, if you want to get really good at video as quickly as you possibly can, the very best way to do that is to go live, whether it's a live stream or you're, doing a live webinar or whatever it is. That is the best way, because whatever hole is in front of you, you have got to dig your way out of. It's just like speaking on a stage. If you have that sort of fear and you're trying to be perfect and all that other stuff, and something goes haywire, you have to figure out how to, again, navigate through. And those little things are what build the muscle memory. Those experiences are what build the muscle memory and what build the skill and the confidence. and the ability to sort of even laugh at yourself if a mistake does happen. Like humor is underutilized in this space. And it's one of the best ways to create personality sort of showcases, as I like to call them, which is what I called any mistake I made on air. And and it allows you to build. And if done well, it endears you to the audience. So live streaming is hands down the best way to get as good as you can, as quickly as you can. And it has the added bonus of you can't overthink anything. There's no time to overthink anything. You just have to react. And when you learn to do that, it makes all of the recorded stuff so much easier because you don't overthink any of that either. Rather than doing 100 takes, you're good with one or two.
I love it, the overthinking part of it. And when you're
Oh,
live, you don't have the time to overthink. You
yeah.
are in. Again, jumping in with both feet. And I love that advice because, yeah, I think absolutely the public speaking is a big part of it. You're live, you're on the stage, and the bigger
Mhm.
the events, the more things go. But then doing the live stream, because I think video carries with it a different set
Yeah.
of fears
Oh,
than
yeah.
actually having an audience in front of you. I know throughout my career, I've been teaching and also speaking at conferences, but yet when you have to entertain people for a 4-hour training session,
Hmm.
that is unreal in just how you can move people through. Can you detect when they're bored? Can you inspire them, get them excited? Can you move them through these 4 hours and give them a great experience? It's a challenge and it's mentally taxing because
Hmm.
you've got that side conversation going on in your head. And that's what that live practice does to you is
Yeah.
kind of that self-coaching. But you have to control that little voice in your head when you're doing that.
100%. And so it's interesting when I first started my business, I got a position as an adjunct professor in public speaking at one of the universities here where I live. And the reason I did that is because I had always been a doer, meaning I had always done the thing. And now I was trying to teach the thing. And I wanted to hone my ability to teach and coach. And that's one of the, I mean, they're college students. They don't want to be there anyway for the most part. So how do I make this 3-hour, public speaking course interesting? How do I keep them entertained? How do I keep them engaged? And how do I combine all of that with making sure that they learn and absorb the information so that they can pass the class? And
Right.
you're exactly right. It's the same thing when you're on a stage. I can't just sit up there and drone on for 4 hours. I have to bring people I have to make them want to learn it. And you do that by being entertaining to some degree, right? Engaging, energetic, bringing them in. But you have those two sort of divergent trains of thought, which is one is what you're doing, and the other one is like, is anybody even listening to me? What's going on?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I just screwed that up. I hope they didn't notice. Like, or I'm really thirsty, or I have to pee, or whatever it is that's going on over here that is not at all having to do with the training. And that is a huge challenge. I will say one of the first times that I did a live webinar after I had started my business. And now I'd been on air, 20 years of live TV. I think the longest I was ever on air straight was 16 hours. And that was for Hurricane Sandy. And
Oh,
so I'm
wow.
very familiar with live and video. But when you're at a news desk, there's sort of like a cast of characters around you. You've got your co-anchor and you've got the weather person in traffic, and there's a floor director who's cueing you, and there's a producer in your ear. There's some energy to play off of. When I did this webinar, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and I was teaching people like how to use Zoom and show up on camera, and I couldn't see anybody's faces. And I was like 15 minutes into it and my lips were numb and I was like, it's spiraling in my head. I don't even know if anybody's listening to me. I can't see anybody. I can't gauge the interaction or excitement of the crowd. And when that happened, I think one of the things that live TV taught me well for is I did start to have that divergent train of thought, one on what I was teaching and doing, and one with was all the head trash. And TV news taught me to compartmentalize that pretty well and fall back on skills. So even if I couldn't read the audience, I knew that I was presenting well because I knew how to do it, and I could just fall back on that and sort of let it run on autopilot while this head trash side, slowly subsided. But it's tricky, and it's two different sets of skills, being on a stage versus being on camera. There's some overlap there, but too often people think they're great public speakers, so it's going to mean they're fantastic on camera as well, and that's generally not how it works.
No, not at all. And
Yeah.
coming from, so I've been doing internet marketing since late 90s.
Mm.
And so for at least 12 years, I didn't have to worry about video. It was all stage or in person or something like that. Then when we start ushering in video, I can say that for a couple of years, I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated going from a live stage to talking to a camera because, like you said, the energy's not there.
Yeah.
And now what do I feed off of? I that's what I love about being in person is I can always get some nonverbal. I can always get some energy. And I feel that way as well. We just, through the pandemic, and there are still companies that still want Zoom training.
Yeah.
And there is no energy in a Zoom training.
Yeah.
There is, and when half the cameras are off, once in a while I'll get a couple of people, but just speaking to the camera, like you said, that is a completely different set of skills.
Yeah.
But it's a set of skills that can be learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something I had to learn over a couple of years and it's actually, I tell people it requires more mental energy to speak to a camera with no one else around than to speak in a room full of people, because you have to create that energy. You have to create that view of people and that feedback without anyone around. You have to do that yourself. And people don't understand that it's actually more exhausting to do a live stream, to record yourself on video without an audience than to have an audience, because of that. That energy you have to create on your own.
Oh my gosh. You're 100% right. And if I can piggyback on that for a
Yeah.
second, so when I was at NBC, Meredith Vieira was there and she was anchoring on the Today Show. And she's a delight. She is an absolute gem of a human being. And people loved her on the Today Show. I mean, loved her. We're obsessed with her. And she had this great cast of characters around her, meaning her other, Al Roker and all the other big names. Well, Matt Lauer was there at the same time too, but we'll let him slide for now. And she was beloved because one of the reasons she was so beloved is she had this amazing chemistry with everybody around her because she was so warm. When she left the Today Show, she started her own show, the Meredith Vieira Show, which was a talk show. And she was the sole host. And the show died. And it's not because she was a different person. It's not because she was, not as warm and inviting and people didn't love her, but it was having the energy of the cast around her that really made her shine. And so when she went solo, again, didn't have anything to do with her skill set or her warmth or her credibility or anything. It was just a different energy, and it didn't work. No,
Wow.
I mean, it's the exact same thing.
This is a great time to take a break and introduce a new sponsor to Endless Coffee Cup. What's great is that this sponsor has everything to do with OMCA certification. You see, part of the OMCA certification requires competencies in email marketing, list management, segmentation, marketing automation, and conversion optimization. And in order to do those things, you need a good CRM, a customer relationship management platform. Our new sponsor is a tool that has helped me grow my business for the past 3 years, and that's ActiveCampaign. All types of businesses use ActiveCampaign for their email marketing, CRM, and marketing automation. I do all my email marketing, subscription form handling, landing pages, and automation through ActiveCampaign. It's super easy and intuitive, and if you run into anything confusing, the help content is always easy, accessible, and comprehensive. and it gets you back on track and running campaigns. What I love about Active Campaign is the ability to see the day-to-day results of campaigns and see who's clicking on emails and communications, who's subscribing in their activity. I can segment my lists by activity, such as customers, prospects, fans, or even recent behavior like subscribing or podcast listeners. And I'm not alone. Active Campaign helps more than 185,000 businesses grow by helping them scale and automate their marketing. Are you ready to give it a try? I have great news. For a limited time, Active Campaign is offering our listeners a chance to double your contacts for free when you sign up at activecampaign.com/activate. That means if your email list has 10,000 contacts, you only need to pay for 5,000. Or you can pay the 1,000 and get an extra 1,000 totally free. Let me tell you, once you try Active Campaign, you'll add so many contacts to your lists. It can be easy to hit your contact threshold. Doubling your contacts gives you a way to get started with plenty of room to grow. Go to activecampaign.com/activate to sign up today and claim those bonus contacts. That's activecampaign.com/activate. And now let's get back to our continuing talk about certification. During the pandemic, even a little bit after, I'm doing 3-hour trainings through Zoom, and
Yeah.
to keep your mental state, and because everyone's doing their email on the other side of the camera. It's, if the camera's not, they're not paying attention. So
It's so humiliating.
it is. It is. And at one point, I feel like I am begging way too much for people to turn on their cameras.
Yeah.
But I tell them, like, if you want this to be interesting, I need to know it's interesting to you.
Yeah.
And if you turn off your camera, what you're telling me is you got better things to do.
Yeah.
And so you can watch the recording, turn it off. I'd rather see your reaction because I want to know that this means something.
100%.
Yeah, so I kind of give that pitch at the beginning and the middle because the cameras naturally go off. But that lack of audience is so difficult. And then I'm also recording courses for training
Mhm.
courses. So now it's not even Zoom, it's just looking at a camera, reading a
Yeah.
teleprompter, doing something like that. And it's a whole different set of energy skills
Yeah.
that you've
Yeah.
got to develop to do that, to be personable. And like you said earlier, and there is a moment, and I loved it when you said it because I highlighted it and wrote down the timestamp on it. There's a moment you become yourself. And that is key. I guess that's more of a comfort thing. That now I feel like my personality is coming out. I feel like now I'm more myself, but it takes a while to get there, and that's a nice little milestone.
It 100%. So two sort of supporting things that I had to piggyback on that, to use the same phrase again, is I had the skills, the technical skills. In fact, I did a LinkedIn post about this not all that long ago. The technical skills came, I want to say quickly because I was so bad and so scared when I started, but the technical skills came first. And I could read a news show, a news, program from top to bottom on live and technically have it be, perfect, right? I didn't stumble over my words. I had the right inflection. I had the right energy. I was engaged with the audience. I could ad lib with my co-anchors, that sort of stuff. However, I was still sort of playing the part of a news person. I wasn't really being myself. And when I was then able to take the skills and have the confidence to explore the space of who I am, that's when things really began to change for me. And it happened when I moved from, I was anchoring in Salt Lake City, and then my next job was in Philadelphia. And the morning show in Philadelphia was 7 hours long, I believe. And it had changed, it had expanded during my time there. And so much of it was ad lib and so much of it was personality driven
Wow.
that I really had to lean into getting comfortable with, you know, showing the soft underbelly and the warts and all of that other stuff. And that's when things really did begin to change for me. But it's interesting. I have a client right now who is in the C-suite of a huge international company, massive. And all of her town halls and all of the employees are global. So when there's a town hall or when there is a large team meeting, it's done via Zoom. And this woman is immaculate in every other function of her business life, but she
Mm.
cannot have her camera on during a town hall, and she will not put her camera on for a team meeting because you can, I mean, she does, and she starts to tremble and she's not comfortable with yet taking who she is and putting it here. And
Yeah.
again, it's different. She can do it on a stage, but she can't do it to camera. She's not comfortable with, being herself and also, you know, letting people know where they stand and what the company's doing and all. And part of it's because it's
Wow.
recorded. It's not live. People can go back and watch and the mistakes are all there for everybody to pour over for, ad nauseum. And I think that's part of the fear as well. It takes public speaking and now it puts it in front of a camera, which many of us hate. It's like two perfect storms that come together.
Mhm. Well, and I think just to add on to that, I talked to a university president this week who is struggling not so much with the fear, but with the authenticity
Yeah.
that I have to be on social media. Then there's that I have to be on social media. And, we have to get video. And I feel like I have my own personal PR team. It's like, but I just don't feel like, creating these messages, talking to the camera. He's like, how do you be authentic
Yeah.
with this pressure to, we've got to be on Instagram. We've got to create video. He says, I am just not comfortable with that. It's not me. And hearing those words, like, it's not me. It's not
Mhm.
authentic. How do you work? Because yeah, you've got the fear, but then we have this pressure and authenticity. And there's a whole barrel full of things that people to deal with.
Oh my gosh. The authenticity word has been thrown around so much over the last, and it is important. When I say thrown around, I don't mean to belittle the importance of it, but it's become, I think, almost confusing for people. What, in fact, I don't know. I mean, I'm authentic when I'm walking around my house getting a coffee or I'm, griping about the mess or whatever. Like, what is it? What is it authentic business wise? And then how do I
Yeah,
take
it's
that and put
become
it
a
on camera?
buzzword, that's for sure.
Yes. I honestly will tell you, I think one of the biggest, not I think, I hate when I say I think, I know one of the biggest elements to being authentic on camera is to be spontaneous. And what I mean by spontaneous is not that you're rambling on because you don't know what it is that you want to say and so you just you sort of go all over the place and you're spontaneous that way because you're unprepared. That's not what I mean. You
Yeah.
know what you want to say, you have your talking points or this video was about whatever enrollment, let's say, in the case of this university president. Authenticity is knowing what you need to say, but making it spontaneous. So, throwing in a story, perhaps, about something you experienced when you were going through the process yourself, or your child, your daughter, your son, whomever it is. It's really about not being overly prepared. And
Mm.
oftentimes, when I have a guest on my podcast, they want the questions in advance. And I'm like, unless you're pretty media savvy, I don't do that because what it means is that people then rehearse exactly what they want to say. And it's clear that it's rehearsed and it's not authentic. It doesn't appear that way anyway, especially to people who don't know you. And so when you're, planning whatever it is that you're going to say, or you have a general idea of the talking points, feeling comfortable going off script and talking a little bit about a moment or an emotion that you had while you were going through whatever it is that you're talking about, or that somebody went through. And so spontaneity with boundaries is one of the easiest ways to be authentic. There shouldn't be pressure. If you are able to communicate in person, you are totally able to communicate on camera. You're really just trying to replicate the same cadence and nuance that you have in your personal communication on camera. But people get scared. They start to get still. They want to shrink. Their vocal variety shrinks. Their range shrinks because it's not a natural environment. And so all of those little things come together to people over prep. They ramble. They prepare themselves out of the moment. They're so prepared that they can't pivot or take a turn if something shows up that they need to address. I always say when I first started interviewing people in broadcast, I'd have a list of questions and I had prepared out of the moment. I was not paying attention to what was going on. I didn't really listen to what they said because I was so nervous and I was so worried about getting everything right that I went, just here's the series of questions. I'm going to ask you them one after the other. And somebody could say to me, hey, by the way, my mom was born on Venus and my dad was born on Jupiter. And I have a bunch of, siblings that live on Mercury. And I'd be like, that's great. So tell me about your next quarter's, blah, blah, blah. Because I was so prepared, I wasn't able to be authentic and spontaneous in the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The danger of the overpreparedness. And that's the thing. In podcasting, we get all time, being guests and also interviewing guests. And that is such a vital part
Yeah.
of, I think, an intriguing podcast is that spontaneity, is that being able to play off each other's comments. I tell people that one of the reasons why I love podcasting is there is a personal benefit for it. Because like any conversation, there is that serendipitous moment
Yeah.
that I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. But through conversation, through these questions, it helped me see something differently. And it may not even be related to the podcast. It may be related to something I'm working on over
Mhm.
here. It might be some content I'm developing or a problem I'm working on. Getting that working through just creates these solutions or these ideas that you just wouldn't have before. And so, yeah, when you try to control everything too much, you miss out on what's happening.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the journalism, what journalism prepares you for is being able to plan yet pivot
Hmm.
with what's happening. And so what a great background. That I love the way you explain that and brought that through. That helps me get back to my follow-up to the president there.
I was going to say, but you probably have learned a ton from talking to people that you weren't anticipating on learning or getting some ideas or strategies because you were listening and you asked the right follow up, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why I've got my handy dandy, blue's
Yeah.
clues. I got my handy dandy notebook. But as you're talking, like, just being able to write down about that point about becoming yourself, because that is, again, when we think about people who have a fear of speaking, it's that fear of, I'm going to come across as something different.
Yeah.
People might not understand who I am, and I'm not able to communicate that. And that's a struggle. It's a fear. And so, being able to write that down in the middle of the conversation and come back to it 20 minutes later, yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, I think too, maybe I need to put on some armor because if I am myself, maybe they're not going to like me. I mean, listen,
Ooh,
that fear of rejection and, lowered status, the fear goes back to our caveman brains. And we could dive into the sort of the way the brain works when are on a stage or in front of a camera. But the very real fear, it's applicable to everybody. People think, you see some big name or you see some, I don't know, huge person or giant in the entrepreneurial space or in the political world or wherever it is, somebody that's making national or international headlines and think that they don't have those same fears. They 100% do. I have not come across anyone, maybe some sort of narcissistic sociopath doesn't have this fear, but I haven't come across them. But everybody has that fear of rejection and lowered status. But I mean, it's universal,
Mhm.
100%. And so, one of the really challenging things is if I say this thing or if I do this thing, is my clan, is my caveman group, the audience, are they going to kick me out of the cave? And are they going to pretty much send me on my way to a sure death at the, fangs of a saber-toothed tiger hanging around the corner? I mean, that's where all that fear comes from.
I love that. So one of the things that helped me work through that is there was a show on years ago, and it was Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it was interesting. I loved it because a lot of the jokes, and it was one of those where they watch a movie and they make comments about it. But a lot of the jokes, I told someone, unless you had a liberal arts education in the 80s and 90s, you wouldn't get it. And now my kids love it, my daughters love watching it. They stuff flies over their head. But I saw an interview with one of the creators, and they asked him, "Aren't you afraid that everyone's not gonna get it?" And his response was, "Well, we didn't make this for everybody.
Yeah.
The right people will get it." And
Yep.
I was just that was so liberating, that idea that it's okay,
Yeah.
because there will be an audience and I'll reach them. So I gotta ask you, how did you get past that fear of rejection? What was it that, or is it that enables you to get around that?
I don't think the fear ever goes away. I'm not
Mhm.
I'm not fully over it yet. Well,
Yeah.
I've learned how to, I mean, listen, I regard, like, doing something like this, a podcast, I don't have any of those sorts of fears. What I do fear is, posting video, for example, on LinkedIn and getting no response. Like, am I speaking into the void? Why is
Yeah.
that happens? There is a side note to that. Every client that I've ever gotten from LinkedIn content they have never been somebody who has commented on my posts or engaged with me. They're always people that are watching in the background from the sidelines, and then they
Exactly.
reach out. So put that up here. Anybody who's listening, don't worry if people aren't engaging, as long as you're talking to the right audience and you're using their language. They are watching.
Love it.
But the fear, I don't think ever, for me anyway, never fully goes away. When I get up on stage, I just got back from a speaking engagement prior to this episode, and I was up most of the night practicing and rehearsing. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do. What I've learned is that not doing it is not an option. It's just not. That has been practically I don't want to say the only way, but the hands down biggest way I've grown my network and grown my client list is from getting on video and talking, right? Whether it's a speaking engagement, whether it is a social media post, whatever the case may be, not getting on video is just not an option. So I have to do it with the fear anyway. Fear, I don't believe in fearless. I think I don't know anybody who's fearless. I know people
No.
who do it with the fear, and that's what I do.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing, because I think a lot of people who have the fear don't don't feel like they can ever get past. I mean, you are an amazing example of, you've been on television broadcasts, you've been doing all this, and yet still dealing with the fear. So I hope this inspires people. I mean, you're also coaching people through this as well. And so being able to draw from that personal experience gives you, I think, an edge, because you still have that fear, rather
Yeah.
than someone who's coaching who cannot empathize with the fear or have a clue what that even means.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of how I figured out what I do and who I do it for. I serve the person that I once was, whether they're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, or they're, a huge C-suite level executive at a massive company and their team or their direct reports. Like, the fear is the same thread. It may manifest in slightly different ways, but the underlying reason behind it is the same. And the best practices for getting over it and for delivering well are also the same, for the most part, whether you are doing a town hall for 10,000 employees or whether you are posting something on Instagram.
Mm, amazing, amazing. And this is what I absolutely love, that because part of my training of people in marketing
Yeah.
is also seeing that the biggest skill set gaps are presentation skills,
Mhm.
team building skills, basically basic communications
Yeah.
within an organization to leadership to clients, that we're not just missing these hard skills or these adaptable skills, it's communication skills are
Mhm.
becoming the most in demand skills on the market today. And
It's
so whether it's in person or on Instagram, I love what you said.
well, it's funny. I was doing a little research the other day on exactly what you're talking about, and I forget the specific number, but I believe in the United States, the estimates were $349 billion annually lost to ineffective communication. I
Yes.
think it's close to that, if that's not it exactly. And that was from, couple of years ago. It's grown since then. And that puts into, I think, black and white. It's not just a soft skill or a nice to have. You are actually losing money. You are losing sales. You are losing an engaged workforce. You are losing out on building a company culture if you're not able to do those things well. If you're not able to communicate well in whatever format or situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this so I gotta tell you, I had this moment of clarity the other day because I had to teach government employees about AI.
I would
And
have liked to see some video of that.
oh my goodness. And as I'm teaching, it's like that voice in my head. I had this revelation, and it was, we've got all these courses right now on prompt engineering,
Mhm.
on how to create prompts to get what you want. Why aren't we doing prompt engineering for communicating to other people?
Oh my gosh.
How much more effective would our workforce be? Would our teams be if we worked just as hard at engineering our instructions and communication as we
Yeah.
are with AI? And it was just,
That's actually pretty cool. I wouldn't have put it together the way that you just did, but it makes perfect sense. We're focused on all of these sort of like very granular things where a lot of the foundations that you're talking about, communication, yeah, we can fix all the stuff up here, but if this part isn't built correctly, we're still going to struggle.
yeah, absolutely. And if you look at these AI prompt engineering sheets, that it's a framework.
Yeah.
It's okay, who's your audience? How do you want them to think? What's the goal? What are the parameters? I'm like, why? Being in the workforce, the lack of communication of do this. Well,
Hmm.
what are the parameters? They aren't communicated, or they aren't
Yeah.
communicated well, or there's an expectation that's not out there. And then, but with AI, you just continue to prompt, 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 prompt. We're not
Yeah.
doing that with people, and we're not
No.
teaching good communication.
You should do a course on that.
Prompt engineering for people. I like it.
Yeah. I'd buy it.
It's just funny because and the funny thing is we do this in all areas of our life. We do it with our kids. We do it
Oh,
with people. That here's what I want. Here's what I want you to do, and we don't
yeah.
fill in the gaps. It's
Yeah.
figure it out on your own. Whereas with a machine, we're so much more patient. We had so many more
There's so many
instructions.
more touch points. Okay, I'm going to regenerate that response and I'm going to ask you in a slightly different way with a little more explanation.
Yeah,
But you're 100% right. I tell my kids to do something one time and I'm like, I don't understand why you didn't what was asking you to do. Like, why didn't you get it? It's very simple. I said blah. And they're like, yeah, but I don't know this step and this step and this step to get to the blah part.
yep, yep. Yep. Oh, I'll give you a clear example. It happened just today. Empty the dishwasher.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And meanwhile, the clean dishes in the dish rack that didn't go in the dishwasher are still sitting there. It's like inherent in that command is put away all clean dishes. But,
Let's
you
just
know,
take them out of the dishwasher and put them on the counter.
yeah. I'm like, so there's additional instructions, but
Oh my gosh. It's exhausting, man.
it is. It is. Now, if we took our prompts engineering and put them in an email,
Yeah.
I think that is such an incredible number, that ineffective communication, and we see
Yeah.
it every day. Wow, Carrie, this has been so much fun.
Not to be a guest. Thank you for
Oh, I gotta have you back again. And it's funny because journalism has been just this recurring theme. I think in MPN, there's a lot of people with journalism backgrounds, but also just the past few hosts or past few guests have had that journalism background. And like you, I went for it because it was communications. I think my choices were theater or broadcast.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll go for the writing.
Yeah.
That's that's but like you, I did an internship at a radio station
Hmm.
and just became in love with it and learning everything that went on, learning the communication and it learning how to pattern the voice. That was just so much fun through my college years and then beyond. But then everything I learned just directly applied to digital marketing
Yeah.
because it's all communications. So I stress anyone who wants to go into digital marketing. It's funny. I did a webinar the other day. There were 40 different backgrounds out of 100
Wow.
people attending, everything from law to commercial business, but they're in marketing.
Hmm.
And communications and journalism showed up really well, but I would say less, maybe 10% actually had a
Really?
marketing degree.
Huh.
So yeah, communications is a core, man. I gotta tell you.
It is. And you're 100% right. Like the TV was amazing. The newsroom is awesome. It's such a beehive of activity and big personalities and lots of different perspectives and diversity. And people are witty and fast on their feet. And just like in radio, I mean, it's sort of the same, it's the same personality type. And you're 100% spot on. I mean, it's like understanding your audience, what is important to them, selling the information to them, writing it or editing it in a way that is effective and compelling, hooks, conclusion, all that stuff it is exactly in the same lane as digital marketing and it's communications broadly.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's one thing you learned in college that you use all the time?
That I use all the time. Oh my
Curious.
gosh. You know what? Truthfully, probably writing, script writing. And I don't write a lot of scripts for my social media posts, but when I'm doing something that's longer form and I'm bringing video into it, using video to show, not tell necessarily, and combining the words, again, the hook, the making sure that the writing is applicable to somebody listening rather than reading because video is listening, it's not
Mhm.
reading. I would say actually that's probably the biggest skill that I use daily. And I don't just use it in video, I use it anytime I'm creating some sort of presentation. So, for example, the speaking engagement I did just prior to this, I manuscripted the whole thing and and then I turned it into an outline, but I wrote the sentences active and I wrote it in a broadcast style because despite the fact that I'm delivering it from a stage and I'm in front of people, they're still listening and not reading. That sort of
Yeah.
writing is quite different. I use
Hmm.
that daily.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm giving you a wildfire round. Okay, if someone is frustrated creating video for LinkedIn or Instagram, they're trying to promote their business, what are 3 things they can do that you can give them as a roadmap to start improving their video or enjoying it? Let's say that.
First of all, okay, so this is very basic. Don't overthink it. I mentioned that before. You do not need to have any sort of special gear. You can do everything you need with a phone, your face, and your voice. You don't have to complicate anything. You should be able to knock out a 30-second video in a couple of minutes if you know what it is that you want to say. And so you don't have to have a big production flow or workflow when you're first starting. Aim for once a week, shoot a vertical video for 30 seconds and just start publishing. The second thing I think is a lot of times on LinkedIn, I tend to see a lot of promotional posts, excited to announce blah 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 blah, or look at our new product, blah 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 blah. That stuff is website material. That's not social media content. Story is king on social media, especially on LinkedIn. Those are the types of posts that get the engagement and and make you discoverable. So promotional posts, listen, if you're getting your start, go for it. But ideally, you want to work into story, starting with educating your audience about the problem that they weren't aware of through a story, and then diving into how you help them solve it. And I think the other element when the biggest mistake that I see people make when they're on video is their energy level. So being on video is taking a 3D person, putting them into a 2D image, right? Height and width. There's no context for the viewer or the audience outside of that little rectangle rather, whether it's vertical or horizontal. And so, and then you have the mechanics of the microphone and the lens and all it travels through my computer and into the wires and then up onto yours. And there's a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Not disintegration. I keep wanting to say
Oh,
degeneration. It's also not it.
that came into my head too. And I was like, no, that's not good.
When the quality of it sort of, each time it goes through another set of tech, the quality of the video and everything else. So recognize that you're sort of overcoming all of those little elements when you are in front of the camera. Most people are way too low in their energy. I always say, like, get on camera and dial it up till you feel like you are, the sham wow guy, or you're a cheesy used car salesman. And if you're a car salesman listening to this, I mean no offense. And then go back and look at it and see if in fact what came through the screen is what you felt you were delivering with energy wise. And I would say like 9.5 times out of 10, if you're not used to being on video, it's not. You look tired or small or scared or timid. You got to jump in with both feet. So go crazy.
Love it. Love it. That energy is huge. It's big. I'm seeing more and more video on LinkedIn, and even from the thumbnail, it doesn't
Oh,
look
yeah.
exciting. And so
Mhm.
that is, that's what I teach people is it's that split second judgment that you're going for.
Yep.
Because that's the difference between stopping or scrolling. And it's as simple
Mhm.
as just pushing something with a finger.
Yep.
And so you have got so little time to make that impression.
I will underscore that by saying when I edit a video or when my editor edits a video for me to put up on social, I would say I don't even want the thumbnail. Absolutely 100%. It's got to be clicky. It's got to be interesting, 3 to 5 words tops. It's some sort of interesting image that grabs people's attention, color. And then the second component of that is when my face pops up on the screen after the thumbnail, I want my mouth, this is granular. I want my mouth to be open and the words already coming out. I don't even want a second of downtime between the time they click on that thumbnail and the time that they hear my voice. So it's a matter of like frames. Like I need 5 more frames and then we can start the video. And for anybody who doesn't know what a frame is, it's like 1/60th of a second or something. It's very short, but making sure that everything is firing on all cylinders so that you're catching people's attention and there is no lag from when they click to when you start delivering.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that advice. That is powerful, Kerry. And I am so impressed that you just went bam, 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 got down the list and brought it.
I
Wow.
tend to be long-winded sometimes.
Wow. That was fantastic. I mean, everything was just usable, actionable tactics to do something right now and make it better. So, dear listener, I hope you wrote those down. I wrote them down, and I'm going to put them in the show notes as well for you. Kerry, thank you so much for making the time to be on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. You are a fantastic interviewer, and I can't wait to come back again and have you on my show as well.
I am looking forward to it. And definitely, I think there's a lot we haven't even touched on yet. But this was, I do video, but, I'm still learning. And this was absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed the advice and just learning about you and your background. And I hope this inspires people to continue to work and develop those skills.
Thank you so much.
All
It was
right.
great to be
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. And dear listener, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Endless Coffee Cup podcast. And I don't know about you, but my cup is empty. I am due for another. And so it has been great to have this cup of coffee with you. And I look forward to our next one on the next edition of the Endless Coffee Cup podcast. You've been listening to the Endless Coffee Cup. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody else. And of course, please take just a moment and rate or review us at your favorite podcast service. If you need more information, contact me at sitelogicmarketing.com. Thanks again for being such a great listener.